So, welcome to our Fireside Chat. I have no fireside, but I have a glass of wine, so I hope that counts. Maybe for a start, can you tell us what is your name and what do you do at Wistia?
Yes, I'm Stacy Justino. I'm the Director of Customer Happiness, which means I run our support team, which is currently 16 people,
Mhm.
myself, the director, one customer support manager, though we are hiring right now for a second customer support manager, which is super exciting,
Nice.
two senior customer champions, one of which does our training and onboarding, and one who owns our help center. And then we have 13 customer champions.
And have you always been remote, or is this a pandemic thing that has fallen
Uh,
upon you?
Mostly a pandemic thing, but we have had and do have fully remote folks on our team.
Hmm.
Harper, who is one of our senior champs, the one who actually does training and onboarding, is fully remote, and he's been fully remote for like 2 years.
Okay.
So our training is actually basically remote.
And I guess that also helped then to make the transition a little bit easier for everybody else.
Yes, it made it so that we were able to onboard 3 new customer champions, recently with basically no really any hiccups, and,
Hmm.
our people ops team, have worked to make it really seamless to get laptops, equipment, and everything else for them.
Hmm. So, what has been the biggest change for those who are now currently working from home?
Um, a lot of our team, because they are, you know, people, who like to be around other people, it's been a hard transition for our team, right?
Hmm.
We thrive on being together. So I think that has just been a little difficult.
Hmm.
We have 3 standing social Zooms on the calendar called Champ Hangs at 3
Okay.
p.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. There's no pressure to join, but it's just like a standing time to just be social for a little bit, to kind of make up for not having that opportunity
Hmm.
in the office.
So you're all in the same time zone, more or less, I gather.
More or less, yes.
Mm-mm. And then you just like spin up a Zoom call, and people can join or leave or
Yep,
whatever they feel like. And it's
exactly.
work time or it's hangout time. Like you're working together there, or you're socializing more than.
Socializing,
Hmm.
right? In the office, probably you'd be having a few breaks here and there with a couple
Hmm.
coworkers, and
Yeah.
so we're like, okay, we're going to set aside that time. As a company, we're also doing multiple social Zooms, and people can just sign up on a Google Calendar, and be like, hey, I'm going to have a social Zoom, to talk about bread baking. That's one that happened
Oh,
recently.
this is a
Uh,
really good idea. I'm so stealing that.
and one of our coworkers, he is at home on his parents' property, and so he did a tractor Zoom. So he had his iPhone, and he was, showing off the different tractors at his parents' place. And my son
Okay.
and a bunch of other children and all the adults, let's be real,
Hmm.
might have been one of the most popular social Zooms so far.
Wow, a tractor Zoom. Okay. Yeah, I mean, people are confined in all different
Mhm.
types of homes. That is very true. So, in terms of, have any processes really changed apart from doing the social Zooms?
We have been trying to be more communicative. Like in
Mhm.
the office, you can tell when people are going to lunch
Hmm.
or on a call, right? It's a little bit harder when you're at home. And people were getting used to their schedules,
Hmm.
working environment, right? Most of us aren't living by ourselves, so
Yeah.
maybe you're not able to get started at the same time, or maybe you can get started earlier. And we weren't really communicating with each other, like, oh, knowing how many people are actively answering tickets in our inbox, just because it's a little bit harder to herd
To
cats
pinpoint
and
who's where.
feed
Yeah.
cats.
So, which you use Slack for that?
Yes, we use Slack.
Hmm. So, I know that some companies very aggressively use the Slack status for these kind of information, but you do it in chat itself.
Both, right?
Hmm.
Our goes back to, I think, our team being pretty social, so
Hmm.
it's kind of to try to mimic some of the stuff that will be happening in real life. But we also really tried to emphasize the use of statuses. I think most people on the team have the Google Calendar integration,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
which is
So
nice.
at least the meetings are
Yeah.
always on Slack. Very true. Yeah. What other tools do you recommend for people who are now struggling with suddenly having to be remote? Like, what was most helpful for you?
Um, what's most helpful right now? Uh, We have been using a lot of Soapbox. That's our tool. But I mean,
Hmm.
we've always used it, but like giving updates from customer happiness to other teams. We're still doing like our demos, which we call show and tell, every other week, as well as our all hands meeting via Zoom.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, Soapbox has been good to like in between if there's something we wanted to update people on, and just to be able to like see your coworker's face when you might not see them as much. Um, I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, we've been using Donut. We already used it before the
That's the
pandemic.
one where you compare people, right?
Yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Yeah.
And so I think I've been actively encouraging people to use it. It's been nice to connect with people who I don't normally connect with, or
Hmm.
connect with people that I enjoyed seeing in the office and I can't see. So I actually had mine set up to exclude all the people from customer happiness because I talk to them all the time. And
Yeah.
so I was getting paired with them. And I was like, oh, we already talked to each other a bunch, but I'm going to actually go in today and put them all back because I think right now I'd like to talk to and connect with anybody at work because I don't get to connect
Mm-mm.
with them like I had been
Mm-mm.
when we were all co-located together.
I think we are also now, like, how long has it been now where you are that you have to stay home? It's probably like 6 weeks as well.
Um, yeah, the stay-at-home order was extended, and well, daycares are closed until June 29th, and then schools were closed through the end of the
Mhm.
school year. So, and Wistia is taking a pretty conservative approach. So even when the state or city says, "Hey, you can come back," we know that we can do our work
Mhm.
remotely, so we don't want to burden the systems by rushing back to the office,
Yeah.
which means putting 100 more people on the T. Um,
Yeah.
and so we are going to probably hold back
Hmm.
until we see how that goes.
Mm-mm. Yeah, like from my experience, it feels like we are now on week 8 here in Spain, and it feels like after 5 to 6 weeks, people kind of adjusted. Like that was the moment where it was like, no, oh, I'm just counting the days until I go back, but more like I realized that this might actually be something that has changed the way I work forever. And of course, if you're a parent, like I'm dreaming with school being back on because it just structures the way in a much like it structures the day in a way that it's easier to handle.
Yes,
So,
yes.
but the work from home, I could imagine that many people will probably then go towards like, oh, I would like to like do maybe a couple of days a week from home, or like make it a little bit more hybrid or.
Yeah, I think so. One of our 2020 goals at Wistia was to improve the remote employee experience. Now, as we have hired a few more remote employees, but most roles at Wistia were like in person, and then if you're a high performer, then you could move to working from home,
Hmm.
being remote. But we have recently onboarded. This is before the pandemic.
Hmm.
Remote employees into teams that weren't traditionally remote friendly from the start.
Hmm.
So I think we'll see more of that and really be like, if that can help us get better talent, then we can
Yeah,
find,
why not?
then why not, right? And we know we can handle it, and we're really focusing on trying to make all of our like operating system and how we run meetings uh remote friendly so that it can be a like on par experience.
Mm-mm. How does Klaus fit into this for you?
Well, I think Klaus makes it easy to continue doing quality reviews, even if we're not in the same room. We actually had done a couple where at least one of the participants was working from home for whatever reason. So,
Hmm.
and it worked out fine when we were doing like face to face, like review sessions together. So, it's really, the tool's super easy to use. It's not like super resource intensive or anything. So,
Hmm.
you could pull it up on share your screen really easily. And when you're sharing your screen, it's like a really clean interface, so it's not really distracting when you're going through looking at a
Hmm.
conversation in class. So I think that it was a pretty smooth transition, and it's also software that is like really easy for anybody to kind of pick up.
Hmm.
So we're onboarding new chants, and next week I'm going to go through our quality criteria and how we run a peer review program at Wistia.
Hmm.
And I'm pretty confident that it'll be just the same as if I was in person doing it with them.
Hmm. So your process is you review tickets first and then you do a Zoom call with them and kind of share what you found, or?
Yeah, that's what they do.
Hmm.
They'll review. So on our team, we do peer reviews, and each champ will review five tickets for another champ, and then they will discuss that feedback together. The goal is that the feedback is completed at least a day before the session, so everybody has a chance
Hmm.
to read through the feedback.
Yeah.
And I try to, emphasize that somebody should be able to read your feedback and understand what you said, what you're saying,
Yeah.
without having to necessarily do it face to face. But this face to face discussion is important. And so I think that we could even move to a system if for some reason timing didn't work out, that like we could still get benefit and consistency in quality, even without having that meeting element if for some reason it didn't work out.
Mhm. Yeah, as soon as you go into other time zones, sometimes the meeting part is more more difficult to handle. But I agree that it makes it often easier to also get like the more critical points across that otherwise in writing, no one really likes to criticize their peers. So sometimes putting it like lightly in the comment and then talking about it might actually make it much easier. Do you use Klaus also for onboarding and training? Like you said that you would be review what they learned, but do people that onboard also already review tickets, or is that something that starts later?
They'll do it fairly early on. So we generally go over peer reviews, the process, and then the criteria around week 4 of onboarding. And what I'll
Hmm.
do is for that first meeting is I'll have them review one of their own tickets and then talk through it. So it's like not having the pressure of like reviewing their colleague right away.
Yeah, yeah.
But they go through the process, and then basically it's more like talking through how they did that, and then me kind of facilitating and seeing how everybody
Hmm.
reviewed their own ticket, which I think is like good way to ease into that process, but still get them in early on, right? Because you don't want
Hmm.
it to be like a weird surprise, like, oh,
And by the
you did
way,
this and we never told you about it.
uh-uh. And I actually think that you can learn a lot from reviewing your own tickets, especially during onboarding, where like the learning curve is still very visible. So if you review something a week before, you feel that you're making progress. So it's an interesting way to actually encourage that people learn quickly. We already talked about how you're doing like the Zoom calls together. Are there any other things that you can recommend or that really worked for you to maintain this type of connection for a team that by default is very social?
That's a great question. So like I mentioned, we have been doing those social Zooms. We've been trying to make sure that we're bringing up small things that may be coming up, trying to keep people on the same page because a lot of times you might have a side conversation with someone. So we're trying to make sure that those are being communicated. Slack can be moving a lot more quickly with
Hmm.
everybody online. So myself and the support manager, Jordan, we try to make sure that if something is communicated in Slack, but it's probably going to be a little more longer lasting, or you're going to want to refer to it later, that we ask that person, or if it's ourselves, follow up with an email, so
Hmm.
somebody doesn't have to search for keywords in Slack or scroll back a bunch to try to find that tidbit of information they needed to answer a ticket.
Do you use some kind of you said that you put that into an email, then do you use some kind of Basecamp or Notion or whatever is out there in terms of knowledge maintenance software?
Yeah, we use Quip. That's what it's like
Hmm.
a Salesforce product, I think, for internal documentation. It is really helpful because it is supposed to be sort of collaborative. So you share the document, and then people can highlight and leave comments.
Oh, okay. Hmm.
Multiple people, if everybody has access to the document, then they can edit it. You can lock it if you're like, no, this is the letter of the law for this specific thing. Um, and so we've been using that too whenever we're introducing a change in like process or flow. This is pre-pandemic, but I think it's even more important now
Hmm.
that everybody's remote. Is, hey, this is a thing where change we're thinking about making. Here's a Quip doc. Please leave your comments and questions in the doc. We'll talk about it in our next chance sync before we roll it out.
Hmm. Do you have one-on-ones?
Yeah. So we do weekly one-on-ones. I do them with my direct reports. Jordan does them with his direct reports, and some of our new manager will do them with their direct reports when they start.
Which cadence do you use?
I do them weekly, and Jordan does them weekly with his champs. Things kind of move quickly with, you know, releases
Uh-uh.
or just weird things happening. So we found that weekly, half-hour weekly, is a good cadence for our
Oh,
team.
so you did weekly already before being remote?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay. Like my experience has been that in office, people kind of tend to leave the one-on-ones for when they're needed, whatever that needs means. So it's really nice to hear that you're doing them weekly anyway. In terms of the hiring process, you said it's actually very interesting that you were already looking into going more remotely, and then the pandemic struck, and it's like, well, we wanted to do this anyway, so let's just speed it up. How
Yeah.
have you
And I mean,
adapted the hiring process?
well, we had a really solid hiring process in our department. We have same set of questions we use for each interview. We make sure that everybody, we have like a pre kickoff meeting so that everybody's on the same page. What are we hiring for? And is on the, on the same page. So we already had a really good system that actually transferred to remote very easily.
Hmm.
Yeah, there really hasn't been, actually, there's been a benefit. You don't have to look for conference rooms. So, or actually, we're able to schedule in-person interviews a lot more efficiently
Oh, of
because
course.
we
Yeah.
weren't battling other teams for conference rooms for either team meetings or interviews, like concurrent interviews for different open positions.
Huh.
So we actually were able to hire 3 people in 3 or 4 weeks, I think.
Huh.
And it was all during the pandemic.
That's a benefit that had not occurred to me. That is beautiful. Yeah. You do all your interview process via video calls now, or do you also do written interviews?
Primarily video calls. For a customer champion position, we do have 3 questions on the application, and then once you go through the initial like not hiring manager, recruiter phone
Hmm.
call, we send like a writing test.
Oh, okay, it's a test. Okay, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. We are currently experimenting with doing like one of the interviews via. We use Discord because that's easy to get on without having to invite them to Slack to see how they communicate via chat.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because when you're remote, a lot of the communication is actually in chat, so it's nice to like see how people can actually write down the things succinctly and in a timely manner, because if you're in a one-on-one interview via chat, you don't want to wait 7 minutes until there's the next
Yeah,
sentence.
yeah. Oh no, I think that's really interesting, and I hadn't really thought about like that being kind of core. We actually have had situations where like if folks weren't as familiar with using chat applications for work,
Hmm.
that making sure to check them didn't really come naturally. So that's an interesting
Huh.
thing to interview for that might mitigate some of that unknown how they might handle that kind of situation.
Yeah, and it's also I think a good way for them to check whether this is something they can handle,
Yeah, for
because in the
sure.
end it's a double-sided two-way road, or whatever you say in English for that.